Hi, everyone. This is your missing snowbird and Lighthouse Community Church of San Diego Bureau roving reporter, Craig. I spent the early morning and afternoon at La Jolla Beach today, communing with nature and with the sea lions, pondering the beauties of God's creation, while gathering insights for our discussion today of the book of Ecclesiastes. Not to be outdone, I also managed to get a sunburn while I was doing that. Well, let's begin with what little inspiration that I did find for today that I have to share with you as we are getting ready to start our discipleship look into the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, the book of Ecclesiastes is what we call wisdom literature. That is not just a biblical genre of literature, but in the ancient Near East, it was quite a common form. You can find examples of wisdom literature in Egypt, in Babylon, many of the countries that left us written records from the ancient Near East, from the time of the pharaohs, of Moses, of Babylon, of Egypt, all of those. You'll find examples of wisdom literature. So it kind of raises a question for us right at the beginning. What exactly is wisdom literature? Now, we're going to look at it particularly from a biblical viewpoint, but in generic terms, wisdom literature consists of two things. One, it's characterized by teaching the audience or the readers the things that are necessary to attain virtue, how to attain virtuous living, how to be brave, to be bold. It's just designed to give them common sense rules for how they live their life, their everyday life. It's designed not for the poor, not for the rich, but literally for everyone. And you will find, like I said, many examples of this throughout, throughout the ancient Near East. Now, the second thing, though, is not only does it teach the audience the things necessary to attain virtue, but just as importantly, it also teaches them how to obtain divine favor. Now, again, we're just speaking in generic terms here, so that might mean that in Egypt, you might read a book of Proverbs that included examples of how you get to attain the favor of the sun god Ra or Amenhotep. If you're in Babylon, it would be another god, but the wisdom literature tells you, how do you approach this God? What do you say to him? What can you expect from him? Just little things like an instruction manual, if you will, for approaching God. Now, we're approaching wisdom literature in this case from a biblical perspective. Both those things, by the way, still hold true. We are teaching the audience things necessary to attain virtue, but also how to obtain divine favor. And one other thing that is more common in biblical wisdom literature is also an understanding of man's relationship to God. Just to give you some quick examples of what I'm talking about, if you're looking for instructions for successful living, you go to the book of Proverbs. You'll find that the book of Proverbs is loaded, particularly in chapters 1 through 10, with examples of things to do, how to live a virtuous life, how to be wise and not a fool, how to find a wise woman for your wife. All of those things show up mainly in the book of Proverbs. Now, another thing we talk about is the obtaining of divine favor and understanding who God is. You get much more of that in the book of Job. If you read the book of Job, you'll see Job wrestling with issues and perplexities that are common to human existence. Now, he wrestles with them on a grand scale, but a close reading of the book of Job really draws you face to face with the realities of life, with how cruelty could intervene, and how we work with God when we're going through those things. So, book of Job is a good example of this. And then in understanding man's relationship to God, again, you might go to some of the Psalms. You'll notice I didn't say you go to the entire book of Psalms. Psalms is not considered as a book to be wisdom literature, but certain of the Psalms are considered to be wisdom literature and are held out for that. Some of them are like Psalm 1, which talks about meditating on God's law, Psalm 37, Psalm 49, Psalms that talk about the divine creation and contemplating it, seeing God in the creation. Psalm 73, Psalm 119, and Psalm 127 and 128. All of these are considered wisdom psalms, a subgenre of the book of Psalms. So they, are, again, all part of the wisdom literature in the Bible. Technically, if you want to get real, there are only 3 books in the Old Testament that are considered completely wisdom literature. That would be the book of Proverbs, the book of Job, also the book of Ecclesiastes. Song of Songs, another Old Testament book written by Solomon, sometimes gets included in the list, but you get some dispute about that. And if you're saying to yourself, well, what about the New Testament? There's only one book in the New Testament which is considered to possibly fit the definition of a book of wisdom, and that's the book of James. You read in James about controlling the tongue, interacting with people. There's a lot of wisdom in James and avoiding temptation and relating to God. So you get a little bit of an idea that that might be considered the closest the New Testament has to a book of wisdom. Now, our Catholic and Greek Orthodox friends, they also have books of wisdom that they look at that we don't consider. The Catholic Church has got a book called The Wisdom of Solomon. It's in what's called the Apocrypha, and also Syriac, which is Ecclesiastes, which is also in the Apocrypha. But we're not going to worry much about those at this time, since they don't affect us. And in particular, though, we're looking at the book of Ecclesiastes this time in our discipleship program. You're going to be going through the book, contemplating some of the teachings there. Remember how I said the 3 things to look for are the things necessary to attain virtue or for practical living, how to obtain divine favor, and also a deeper understanding of man's relationship with God. And we're going to find elements of all 3 of those in the book of Ecclesiastes. But just to give you some background as you are preparing to get involved with it, Ecclesiastes doesn't tell us who its author is directly. Most people consider Solomon to be the author of the book of Ecclesiastes. And that is because in Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and verse 1, it says, "The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem." And that's a pretty good indicator that we're dealing with the king of Israel, but we're also dealing with the king of Israel renowned for his wisdom. And Solomon is the one who pretty much fits that bill better than anyone else. And so that's why you'll find most scholars consider that it was written by Solomon. It would have been written sometime in about the 10th century BC, which is like between 900 and 1000 BC. So we're talking a book here that at this point in time is over 3,000 years old. And yet as you're looking at it, you're going to find the wisdom resonates today just as clearly and just as accurately as it did when Solomon was first writing it down. And just in case you were wondering, how does it come across the name of Ecclesiastes? That's just kind of one of those simple quirks of naming the books of the Bible. Ecclesiastes is a Latin word. It translates the word in chapter 1, verse 1, that we call preacher, or in the Hebrew it's called koheleth. It basically simply means the assembly or the speaker to the assembly. So Ecclesiastes, quite often you'll hear him referred to as the preacher, if not referred to as koheleth. So it's someone who is speaking to a group, a religious group in this case. So that's where the name Ecclesiastes comes from. Comes from the Latin because the Catholic Church named a lot of the books in the Bible, and they usually used a word from the first verse in it. Same thing that the Jews did in the Old Testament. Now, as we're thinking about it, you're probably wondering to yourself, okay, this is all good, but why are we using it? What are we looking for here in this book that's going to help us with discipleship? And one of the things that scholars point out is the theme of the book of Ecclesiastes is the need to fear God in a fallen, confusing, frustrating world. As you read through Ecclesiastes, you are going to find yourself kind of going back and forth between a very pessimistic viewpoint of man, a very pessimistic viewpoint of life, and yet an optimistic viewpoint also. You're going to get both sides of it. And indeed, one of the things I'll warn you about as you're reading it to Ecclesiastes is be very careful about trying to find a consistent message in the book. It's very difficult to do that. And sometimes you can get caught up so busy trying to make everything work together that you miss what the author's trying to do. So don't worry about looking for a totally consistent message in the book of Ecclesiastes, because you're going to have very great difficulty finding one. Very few scholars will point to a consistent message, and the ones that do usually are stretching things a little further than we want. Just to give you a bit of an example, in Ecclesiastes, it talks about wisdom a lot, as you'd expect in a wisdom book. But in Ecclesiastes chapter 7 and verse 12, the preacher says, well, wisdom preserves life. Indeed, what he says is the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of him who has it. That's chapter 7, verse 12. But if you go back 5 chapters to chapter 2, verse 16, you'll find that the preacher says this also. He says, it fails to preserve life. For of the wise as of the fool, there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies, just like the fool. So if you're looking to make a consistent message, that's going to be causing you a bit of a problem. How do you juxtapose those two things? Another issue, or not issue, but another example is this, about death. He's talking about, in one case, death is superior to life. Chapter 4 and verse 12, Solomon says, and I thought the dead who were already dead more fortunate than the living who are still alive. And yet, if you keep going, in chapter 9 and verses 4 to 6, he says that life is superior to death. He says, but he who is joined with all the living has hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward. For the memory of them is forgotten. Their love and their hate and their envy have already perished, and forever they have no more share of it all that is done under the sun. So, like I said, if you're searching for a consistent theme and message, you're not going to find it in this book. The main theme, the main thing you want to be looking for is what the preacher is saying, that, or what the preacher is doing, which is he's being a guide. He's trying to challenge us in some ways. He's encouraging at some times, but at other times, he'll be talking about things and he'll play the devil's advocate. And when you say, well, what's a devil's advocate? It basically means he'll take the opposite side of what he knows to be true and push it out there just to get you to think about it, just because he wants you to stretch your mind, stretch your imagination. So if you're looking for consistency, that can be a challenge. But if you're willing to go along and listen to what he says, taking each part, each time, and thinking it through, you'll find that the book of Ecclesiastes is full of wisdom that it has for you. But like I said, don't get caught up in that thinking for consistency. Now, let me just close this morning with one last thing for you, and that is this. What is the purpose of the book of Ecclesiastes? And as near as I can tell from the reading and from the study I've done and from the preachers that I've heard talk about it, there's really 3 ideas that, we want to be looking to. And it's those 3 ideas that I talked to you about right as we were beginning. As you're reading Ecclesiastes, what are the instructions that are given for successful living that the preacher gives to us, that Solomon gives to us? Think about those things. When it's talking also, what is it talking about divine favor? I mean, what is it talking about God? How do we please God? What makes God most pleased with us? That's the second thing you want to be looking for. And the third thing is you want to be looking for what Solomon is telling us about our understanding of man's relationship to God, our own relationship, and God's relationship with us on a regular, practical basis. Let me just close with the last few verses that come in the book of Ecclesiastes, because this is where you get a very good summing up of what he's talking about. And chapter 12 and verses 9 to 14, Solomon says, besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying, and arranging many proverbs with great care. The preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. They are given by one shepherd, that would be God. My son, beware of anything beyond these. Quick thought, as you're reading this, one of the things to come away from Ecclesiastes is to be very aware that the world is just full of wisdom and wise people saying intelligent and wise things, but we always want to measure everything we hear by the Bible, by what God teaches us. All must come into that measurement. Like he says here, of making many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. And I think that he's telling us that we want to live our life. You know, sometimes as Christians, we can get caught up with trying to understand deeper and deeper into the Bible, all of which is good things. But we also want to take the time to live our life. That's what one of the things you'll see that the preacher talks to us. Live life. Don't neglect the Bible. Don't neglect the Word of God. Don't neglect God's wisdom. But at the same time, don't get so caught up in studying it that you're doing nothing else. Look to live life as you're going out there. And then the other thing is this. The end of the matter. All has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. So even if you don't find this consistent theme throughout the book of Ecclesiastes, that's what we're really seeking right there. Knowing God's word, how best to relate to him, fearing him and keeping his commandments. The author's trying to tell us that you don't have to be a biblical scholar locked away in a religious cloister with nothing else going on, studying deep, heavy religious tomes all of your life. You need to live life as well as understand what God wants from it. That's what you'll find in Ecclesiastes. So let me just close with an encouraging thought. As you study it in your discipleship at this time, look for these nuggets. Look for the things that he's talking to you about. Try and find not just the deep things, but the joy of life that he'll be talking about and how you can best apply them. And always, always come back to what he says to the end, that the end of the matter is this: fear God and keep his commandments. Well, thank you for giving me some time this morning. Hope we haven't gone too far over. And I wish you good luck as you start your discipleship programs. I'm going to be starting it along with you. I'll be home probably this coming Monday and looking forward to seeing everyone. But in the meantime, greetings from California, and I'll try and bring as much of the warm weather back with me as I can.